begin? Great. With that said, I'd like to open this debate, calling on the Honorable Prime Minister, of which the motion stands in their name, here. Please be mindful of equity, pronoun, POI preferences, all that chat. Please time yourselves as well for a good debate. Let's go.
Okay. Pronouns are she, her, and I'll take verbal POIs. Okay. Yeah, I'll just start then. 2 points of setup at the top of the speech. The first is, what does this deadly attack actually look like? I think it broadly looks like three things. The first is you're trying to eliminate the amount of deaths. So it's not like you're just going to randomly going to rampage with like no sort of, I guess, organization. It probably looks like you're not going to try kill a lot of people. Rather, you'd rather like capture these people. So it's likely looks like not having a lot of like you're likely not going to get a lot of retaliation. And that is because a lot of the time, the anti-gamers, I mean the pro gamers, are often unaware of this like attack. They're working very hard for the next round. So it's unlikely you have a lot of deaths in the very first place. But secondly, you target those who are on the brink of changing to your side in the very first place. So it's likely that you capture these people instead of like capturing those who are like staunch people who deeply just deeply want like the pro gamers as compared to the anti-gamers. So you probably choose those who are slightly on the side of pro gamers as compared to anti-gamers. And the reason that you can do this is presumably you as like, I guess the person who organizes this probably knows like most of the people within the game. Like you probably know who they are. Given that after 4 rounds, you've probably all become quite close. So you probably know who is on the brink of changing. So you capture those people as compared to like getting those who are the extremists. But the second is, what are the interests of the anti-gamers? I think it looks like two things. The first is that they want peace. Like that's why they don't support the killings in the first place. That's why they don't support the games in the very first place. But secondly, note the fact that they often just have changed their mind like halfway through. So it's not like I think that they often did opt into the system, but they realized that this is an inherently like I guess arbitrary, inherently deadly system that they simply did not want to opt into in like the very first place then afterwards. With that said then, three arguments. The first is, why will this likely be done well? Secondly, why will this convince the pro gamers to change? And thirdly, why do you have a principal obligation to keep people safe away from harm? On the first question then, why will this likely be done well? I think there are broadly three reasons. The first is that you probably know previously that this is going to happen. So like as an anti-gamer and like person like called Seong Gi-hun, I think, he probably knew that this was likely going to be like done, and he's the only person within the like I guess Squid game who knows it. So he probably tells like the people like who he like supports, which is the anti-gamers, right? But secondly, I think Seong Gi-hun is just a very good leader. Like in order to win the Squid Games last year, he probably did have to have some sort of like I guess leadership ability and ability to like I guess like call everyone together and like help everyone. But I think not just because of his leadership abilities, I think it's because he knows the most about the Squid Games. Like presumably he knew about it last year. He was the only person to survive about like last year. That's why he probably knew like the most knowledge about how to deal with the Squid Games. That was why it's very likely he was able to like do things such as talk about secrets like about the Squid Game system that no one else knew about. That's why it was very likely he was able to do it quite well. But thirdly, I think the people who are the anti-gamers in the very first place have a large incentive to listen to and to try very hard to do it very well. And that is because often they are the ones who want to live now. Instead of like going to this like literal like death trap, like they know they want to live now, and that's why they are the ones who want to like try very hard to do quite well. That's why then I think this is a very large piece of preemption that probably takes down a lot of like what OO is going to tell you about this not being done well, why this is likely going to result in even more deaths. But the second like point I'm going to give is, why would this likely then convince the pro gamers to change? There are broadly three reasons. The first is that they probably blamed the organization now for the attack because they were attacked in a moment of vulnerability. The reason that they won't blame the anti-gamers is because they knew that the anti-gamers probably were hostile to them already, but they never gave like the opportunity for the anti-gamers to actually attack them before. That's why like I think they probably blame now the organization instead that hosted Squid Games in the very first place, because it made them like vulnerable in a moment that they could not be. But secondly, the point in which they value their life more than getting the money is the point in which they stop being a pro gamer. I think the deadly attack makes them fear for their life because like I think dark just means that they had an inherent loss of control. They were unable to see around. They had like the like inherent loss of control and just got inherently captured. I think thirdly, you just need one person. As we characterized before in our setup, we'd probably get the person who was like on the brink of changing but still very undecided. So on outside of the house, we'd get this person as compared to getting an extremist. The impact impact was incredibly clear. Firstly, less people just opted into this draconian
Feel
system.
ICO.
Point out here, why is Squid Games inherently cruel if you did not already think it was inherently cruel? Because firstly, 99% of people just died in the very first place. Like when you got to the last game, like only like one person would survive, and that was Seong Gi-hun. So he probably knew like the worst of the Squid Games and had seen the worst of like the very depraved humanity that he had to go through last year. But secondly, this toys with people's mental health and their perception of the world. Like that is to say, like the process of going through Squid Games, when you like eventually know that you're going to die, probably like makes you like feel worse off. You probably get a lot of mental health problems. You feel very, very sad, I guess, about your like extreme, like I guess, like nature of what you're gonna have to go through in the end. But secondly, even if life outside is worse, I think it's comparatively better than that, like within the Squid Games, and that is because the Squid Games, just in and of itself, an
POI.
inherently deprived practice. Before I go into the third point, yeah, sure.
On the concept of blaming the organizers, if there are going to be 20 pro gamers dead and zero on the side of anti-gamers, wouldn't it be easier for the pro gamers to blame the anti-gamers, which will increase factionalism and polarization?
No, we thought that it was because it's more likely, as we explained, that they're gonna blame like the organization. And that was because they already knew that the anti-gamers probably didn't like them in the first place. And that was, and like, but they never gave like them any option to like, I guess, hurt them in the very first place. We explained though, that we'd also just target those who like, were on the brink of changing. So those who started to value their life as compared to like not valuing their life and valuing money more. And the reason for this, that we could do this, as we explained previously, was that you probably had some sort of understanding of who would actually want to like, I guess, would actually want to turn over, who actually like had some sort of incentive to live. With that then said, the third brief argument though is that you have a principal obligation to keep people safe and away from harm. Why is the outside world better than Squid Games? Firstly, in Squid Games, you certainly die, but comparatively, the outside world gives you certain opportunities. These are taken away when you opt into the Squid Game. But secondly, why is the Squid Games inherently misleading the way that it advertises itself to people? Firstly, it's shown as an honor to be selected, so you can't just like have anyone. You actually have to be selected within the Squid Games. But secondly, the money is so large, and that is the reason that people gamble and opt into lotteries, even though a lot of the time they know that they lose like hundreds of dollars. Like I think it's even worse here because you lose like your entire life if you don't get that 456 like billion won right. But thirdly, why should we care more about the people who are anti-gamers? Firstly, they realize the fault of the system. They care about those. We should care about those who might still have a chance to live in a warhouse, for example, as compared to those who are certainly going to die or about to. That's why a lot of the time we care about those who still have some sort of hope to be like brought to the other side. But secondly, they have the will to actually live. We thought we should care about that because when you knew that you were already suicidal, like you probably couldn't prevent that a lot of the time. But when these people who like were able to at least like change or like get out of that situation were able to, we thought that we should help these people. They were the most vulnerable. They realized the faults in the system that was unique on us and proud to propose.
Thank you for that speech to open the case for op calling on LO. Here, here.
Yeah, I'm audible.
Yep, all good.
Okay, sure. Give me a few seconds. Let me set up the time. Yeah, so in the meantime, I'm going to prioritize a POI from closing, but I'm going to ask for it. So don't unmute your mic and ask for the POI. I'll ask for it when I get time to. Yeah, I think that's really it. I'll begin. Okay, so I'm going to start the speech in 3, 2, and 1. There are two key things about anti-gamers that OG misses out. One, the anti-gamers are people who actively disdain the Squid Game system and all it stands for. But two, they actively believe in rising above the Squid Game to end it ultimately. What's the implication of this characterization? It means OG has a very big burden to prove. At what point should anti-gamers compromise their own ideological consistency? Yeah, that's a big burden they have to prove. But secondly, oh shit. Okay. The anti-gamers being against the game are pro-life means that their decision-making calculus is really moral. It means ultimately, if they are to launch an what should I call it? Erratic assault that is happening in the moment, even if they could probably have some time to plan for it, it would probably be a hesitant assault. That is to say, when an anti-gamer has an opportunity to kill one of the other programmers, there could be that moment of hesitancy. Further analysis on this you'll get in my speech. What's the implication? It means the extent to which they can take part in combat effectively is quite unclear. First thing then, on the principle, we see that the incentives of the anti-gamers necessitate that it is synonymous to what they are fighting against to carry out this deadly assault. The anti-gamers' core motivation is not to perpetuate violence. By launching an existentially premeditated massacre, they would be no better than the game's organizers or the programmers who support the brutality. If they resort to the same ruthless tactics as the game itself, they lose the moral high ground, making their cause totally hypocritical and indistinguishable from the system that they oppose. We say that the audience in and of itself, the survivors of this thing, may see this as something that's existentially wrong. But then secondly, notice that this argument is not an argument that is contingent on like pragmatic outcomes. It means entirely that this is about the principle. Why should they compromise their own beliefs? I'm going to show you why we can still save people on their side, necessitating that there is no need to compromise their own beliefs. But there are two key mistakes that PM makes. Because PM makes a very dumb assumption that the programmers are unaware. We think that since they are already in an existential battle between themselves as the two factions, they are already fighting against each other. It means that the programmers most of the times are probably going to be on their toes for the anti-gamers. At the point where there is a blackout, I think the programmers being strategic, all part of Squid Game, blah, 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 they are most likely on their toes and they're probably going to be wary of something like that. If they are probably going to be wary of something like that, it means I just have to weigh up who is much more effective in fighting in that particular situation. And I'm going to prove to you why the programmers are much more effective in fighting in that particular situation, which would mean that the anti-gamers would ultimately lose out on that battle, meaning it's counterintuitive for them to go for this particular thing. Further, this you get my substantive. But the next rebuttal then is they say that they will convince the programmers to convert. Look, by the time you literally participate in a game where lives are being commodified, yet it's lives that literally necessitate human rights in the first place. It goes beyond money. I think it just goes beyond the exhilarating feeling that these people feel. It means that ultimately these people are not worth saving and they are beyond conversion. So you can't claim that you'll convert them on their side. So the first thing, what is the likelihood of the attack succeeding of the anti-gamers? There are two things that make that attack, the success of the attack, unlikely. The first thing is that the organizers are probably manipulating the system. In extension of the info slide, when they are doing this sort of blackout, it means that ultimately the organizers have the capacity to manipulate the system. What would this manipulation look like? I think this manipulation would ultimately look like things like, I don't know, pulling up walls to push them into certain corners, playing noises. Anyway, doing something that would make the playing field unfair for the anti-gamers. They have the incentive to do this because they want their Squid Game and they want to continue watching the Squid Game. It's something they find very entertaining. By virtue of that fact, it means that the anti-gamers are put at a disadvantage. But then secondly, we say that due to the moral compass of the anti-gamers in and of itself, it means they have a lot of existential hesitancy. The existential hesitancy that they feel could be the life or death moment in that split second decision they have to make to kill someone. It looks like having a pro gamer on the ground, one of them hesitating and the pro gamer is able to kill them. We say that the pro gamers don't face this same amount of hesitancy because I've already shown you that the reason why they still participate in the Squid Game in and of itself is because it's something that they actively enjoy. It means that ultimately, due to this high propensity of hesitancy, the anti-gamers are probably going to lose this bout. What's the implication of this? It means that their numbers are ultimately going to reduce and they're not going to be able to stop the Squid Game on a majority basis. Before I go into analyzing alternatives, shoot, CG. CG, OG.
What's your comparative?
Yeah, comparative is coming. Don't worry. The comparative is alternatives, just like I said, bro. So let's understand this thing, yeah? Why is it that alternatives are better? We say the two factions are evenly matched in numbers. Instead of violence, the anti-gamers could leverage their position with a guy like, I don't know his name, but the guy who won the other Squid Game. It means that this guy has existential strategical knowledge of how to be in the Squid Game and how to win. It means that most likely it's better for them to just play the game normally and then like not succumb to what their masters want to do. We say that they have a very high likelihood of winning the game in that instance because they have the previous winner. Why is this a better alternative than what government teams are going to present? This is better because they don't have to risk their ideological consistency, or they don't have to risk the death of their members in those moments of hesitancy that could be very critical for tipping the tails in their favor. We're the only team that shows you why there is an increased likelihood of them winning on the comparative protected time. Being my conclusion, proud to oppose.
Thank you for that speech calling on DPM. Here.
Am I audible and visible?
All good.
Okay. Timers. We're going to start from 3, 2, 1, and now. Yeah, 3 constructive proposed by the opening opposition side. First is tell about killing is inherently bad. And second is that the attack will be ineffective and they will not win. But third is that the pro gamers will not hesitate inside the house. Well, I will respond. I will integrate the rebuttal toward the first point when they are saying that killing is inherently bad into our constructive case. But let me do directive rebuttal to the second and third argument. The second argument to see that the killing will be ineffective. Why is that so? We don't think so. Why is that so? Because when a father is protecting his daughter, when a parent is protecting their children, i.e., when people are trying to save the other people's life, and people want thinking that they are doing the good things, just think of it. If a police is combating the terrorists, right, people could be tough to these games, and I do not think that attack will be ineffective. And even though the attack will be ineffective, I think it will be actually symmetrical because just as what they propose in their third arguments, to say that the pro gamers will not hesitate, let's say that's by their characteristics, we're charitable to them. We say that yes, they are all cold, they are all cold blood. Then what will happen? The only chance for the anti-gamers to win for those people who still has morals, who still have the very conscientious that they stick into. The only chance to win is when it is dark for 2 reasons. Firstly, it is less likely for those pro gamers to organize, and as long as they organize, because they have nothing to worry about, they can do everything they want. So because they're so evil, it's unlikely for the pro gamers, for the anti gamers to win that because they have so much things to worry about. For example, they cannot so easily sacrifice their teammates. They cannot so easily sacrifice or betray their friends, right? The second is that only when it is dark, which means that nobody will see who killed the pro gamers, which actually decrease the moral burden that on people's conscience to say that, oh, I am a killer. It actually lowers the threshold of it because if even though you do kill a pro gamer and you think it's good, because of you are already not suffering, but you are already sticking into so much like social moral education and social norm to say that the killing is inherently wrong. And only in this kind of things, you are going to be least likely to hesitate. You will be the most likely to be like fast, to be accurate, to kill the pro gamers because nobody will see your face, nobody know who you can. But the only thing is that you will know that you are doing the right thing, and people will not accuse you after the game ends, right? People will not accuse you, like to say, oh, this is the killer, we should send him to the police. This is the only chance for you to do so. So we think that people will not hesitate. Comparatively speaking, they will catch the chance and they will be more likely to react, and they are very likely to win over the pro gamers. So one thing we are going to tackle in this debate, why the death attack is not only principally justified but also necessary to do so. Firstly, is that the support of the Squid Game is inherently evil. Why is that so? Because the Squid Game in and out of itself is to use the money, which is like knows nothing for the rich people, but for them to see and laugh at people's dark side of humanity. Will you betray your friend or your teammates or even your families or your beloved in this game just for money, for something that we already have lots of? This is exactly the feelings of the rich people who are organizing these games. And you say, yes, I support this game, but I'm going to make fun, like you see, accept the exchangement of people's humanity and the poor people's dignity for the rich people's entertainment, and all you get is money, which is nothing for rich people. And I do think that by principle unjustified to do so. But secondly, which is even worse, that people literally die in the game, and should be considered as murder. Judge, please know that the people only 20% to 50% of people survive, and in each round, most people will die in the Squid Game. So I think that is literally has nothing to do with the murder, because at the end of the game, it will be like
I
90% people die. Yes, I will take it.
If the anti-gamers are so against murder because it's against their principle, why would they use the same mechanism of murder to launch out a deadly attack to get their own compromise?
This is exactly what I'm going to talk about in my second reason to tell you why it is principally justified to kill. Judge, think of the case. If a terrorist is killing each other, for example, he's randomly killing children in a kindergarten, and you are a policeman, what you will do? Of course, you will shoot them. If there's like let's say a robber who breaks into your house, and it seems like he's going to do something wrong, he has 80 or 90% chance to kill your family, and you have a gun. Of course, you're gonna shoot them, and it's considered legal in lots of cases, like Good Samaritan law in Western countries. And I think it's also principally justified, because you are not killing the innocent people. You are killing a villain. You are killing a killer, and this is going to be a justified thing for you to do so. But not only justified, I do think it is also necessary to do so. You must do it, because if you do not actively add it as the only man who has the power to influence it, and this game will probably just spread over and over again, and more people will see. So your inaction will be actually be a kind of encouragement, or you will adopt this kind of murdering happen again. So two layers of reasons why it's super principle unjust. Firstly, 80% to 90% people literally die, and it is murder. Secondly, is that the rich people are just using the money that they do not give shit to trade for poor people's dignity, just because they're very rich, or probably they're going to trade for, they want to see the dark side of the humanity for the poor people. I do not, for this reason, I do think that is extremely awful. But even though they are not direct killers for this, for people who did support it, I think that they probably buy these values for it's actually a two-layer analysis. Firstly, because they do accept this value, which means that they're probably already antisocial have antisocial personalities, and for example, the Machiavellianism. But secondly, is that if they're going to, if they're actually participating in it, then they're hoping to like have more skill again. And considering that only 10% of people can survive in the end and get the money out, they could directly or indirectly kill lots of other participants in this process. It is very likely to happen, and that's exactly the reason we think that's justified to kill. So, thirdly, is that killing is moral when they are stopping a crime. Why is that so? Because, Judge, as let's come back to the scenario to see that if the terrorist is randomly killing in a kindergarten or in a hospital, and you have a gun, what you should do? Of course, you shoot them. You should deadly attack them. Firstly, it's the only justified punishment they are going to have. Why they're not going to punish by the judicial system? Why they're not going to punish by the police? Simple reason: because rich people manipulated it all, and the police, they have overall control of the police system. So those killers, those pro gamers will never be punished by the normal approach, by the court, by the police, by the judicial system. And it is only chance for you to be vigilant, to call for justice. Judge, based on all those reasons, please vote for opening government. Very proud to propose.
Thank you for that speech, calling on the yellow. Here, here.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to confirm if I'm audible.
Yep, all good.
All right, perfect. Let me just set up my timer and I'll be starting. PI preferences in my fourth and fifth minute do not budge a lot. I'll definitely take one from closing government for engagement purposes. And that being said, that's my speech in 3, 2, and one. Probably the major reason as to why opening government is not going to win this debate is because they don't understand what these anti-gamers actively look like, what their incentives look like, and that's why from Ryan's speech in and of itself, we're already winning the debate, right? Well, let's directly start with engagement to whatever comes from OG's side, right? Firstly, OG comes and tells us that, hey, this attack is more likely to succeed because they have a good leader who knows the system, they have the incentives to listen, and this plan can be well executed, right? 3 reasons why this is not going to succeed. One, without being a good leader, does not equate to being a successful military execution, and the panic in any single form. This means that leadership does not translate into coordinated violent success in pitch black dark rooms of streets and like traumatized civilians. This means that despite the fact that you know rules of past Squid games, it does not mean that you can predict things like combat dynamics in a dark ambulance of zero things like visibility and all those things, right? Even with special forces, without you can still struggle with things like coordination in zero light conditions, but two, but as an anti-gamer who wants the survival of people as your main incentive, you still have the kind of hesitancy to actively go and kill people because that's what you ultimately want to like save, right? You want to save lives. In that instance, you're not gonna like have that kind of active incentive. You're still gonna have that kind of hesitancy to go and kill people, right? But two, notice incentives does not equate to capacity. In that instance, you can't just panic trumps things like obedience. In this instance, we can't just because anti-gamers want to end the game doesn't mean that they can act rationally under fear. This means that lights going out is not an opportunity. It is just a trauma trigger, right? This means that people are just going to be screaming or all those things. In that instance, even if in their best case, some people follow Seong, you only need a few to botch it and chaos still ensures. Like comparative then becomes, whenever we look at our alternatives like leverages and all those things, or further gives them a coordinated political blackout like majority vote, which OG totally like backs out, right? Why? Because in their best case third engagement, right? I'll take it later. In their best case third engagement, right? Even in a successful attack, we know it is strategically a loss for these anti-gamers. Why? Notice, let's still mind their best case where this like kind of kill more like programmers and all their utopian benefits come to, right? Well, it still means that some programmers are more likely to survive. This means that those who survive will become rage-fueled and revenge-driven murder machines, right? Why? Because of two main reasons. Why? We don't these people ultimately want to continue with the game, but two, since they want to continue with the game, they have those kind of skills of killing people massively, right? This means that they fucking now have the justification to kill every single anti-gamer on site, right? This means that the organizations or the organizers can't just invent at every given point when you've nuked your own chance to vote the game out. The impact of this then becomes that even in the best case scenario, you breed things like escalation and not peace, and OG just wins that entire, like loses that entire round. But entirely, with our own side, we win these people, right? Yeah, your PI.
Even though we guarantee to fail, I think it is good to try, and by principle, for us good to try overpower this trapping system, which was manipulated by the rich, who is indifferent of people's lives and the poor people's dignity.
Look, coming on to your principal obligation to protect these anti-gamers, notice you can't protect someone by making them killers. This means that anti-gamers' main incentive is to choose peace over bloodshed, right? And that's why they don't fucking want to go and kill each other in this entire game. Forcing them to ultimately kill under a false idea of protection is a moral betrayal in and of itself. This means that you strip them of the very identity that gives their lives value. This means that the will to survive without becoming part of the game is totally removed out. Comparative on OO's world, we at least protect their kind of dignity, but two, we still preserve a kind of legacy of resistance, right? OG, you completely force them to kill just for a cause that has already collapsed in your other world, but two, the external organizations are already manipulating you, right? This then means that like you either way die, but two, this is a logical trap that the game uses. Notice, infos like literally tells us that the lights go off, right? It doesn't mean that they go off by like out of blue. It is definitely these organizations like organizers or all those like masterminds who are kind of putting this light off, right? This means that this is how the game ultimately justifies things like bloodshed, which is continuously against the entire principles of these anti-gamers, right? Every day, without anti-gamers stay alive without killing, and that's what defines their entire thing, right? OG destroys this narrative because you're just gonna kill these people, and lastly, you don't care them you don't care about anti-gamers, and that in that instance you just get them more killed, right? Because by launching a surprise attack, you provoke things like purple retaliation from pro gamers and lose the moral clarity needed to rally outside votes or swing votes. In that instance, the very people you're trying to protect are not going to be the first casualties of a civil war that you create by your own self. Impact of this OG's moral obligation kind of argument becomes the very reason why anti-gamers are going to die more faster and more brutally in your PI.
Okay, the system that the pro gamers want to like participate in is going to kill everybody. They're going to kill both the anti-gamers and the pro gamers. The anti-gamers need to act.
Look, at a very given point when you use alternatives like leverages and all those things, you at least get some kind. Look, if they're 50-50, right? At least you can try out and convince one single person out of all this comparatively on your side. You just create a bloodshed and everyone is just otherwise gonna die, right? And that's why that entire argument of you telling us that, hey, you're gonna be able to convince programmers to come to your side by sort of like attacking them in the most vulnerable moments is a total fallacy, right? Because it is not persuasion of any kind of system. It's just psychological warfare, right? Because people don't rethink moral decisions, especially when they're under threat. And in that instance, you permanently kill trust, and therefore you don't get any kind of negotiation possible on your side of the world. Why is our case the most important case that comes in this debate, right? One, we tell you how necessarily on principle, sometimes it's much more worse for these guys based on their identity. Part two, how necessarily you're more likely to end up like just causing a warfare in that entire system, how you lose trust, how you lose legitimacy. And lastly, how necessarily there is still going to be some kind of hesitancy, which hesitancy, which becomes the main reason as why anti-gamers are more likely to be killed more, right? Because without the social comparison between them and their enemies still exists, then means that moment of introspections between one's moral beliefs and killings is otherwise going to come. Lastly, without this instigation observation in that moment creates a kind of hesitancy necessitating a high likelihood of taking long to kill your opponents. Hence, you otherwise get killed, right? This means that they can best strategically beat the system with this previous winner and by other comparative methods, alternative methods of leverages and all those things, right? And that's what actively makes OO to win this opening half, right? Not just on their side of what, on impact, you either get far much worse, more impact and scale of magnitude. You see, like, kind of get worse impacts because the entire narrative of anti-gamers, that is a games are wrong and all those things, is otherwise ending the system because you still play a game of these masters and all those things. Because that's what they actually want, right? They want the lights to go off and then they want you guys to kill and you're just obeying their own rules. With that, all proud to oppose.
Thank you for that speech calling on MG. Here.
All right, just audio check.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Okay, so chat POIs, please. I'll probably take someone around 5:30, hoping. Alright, preferably from OO for engagement. My speech will start from 3, 2, 1. It looks like the comparative that OO was giving us is like, oh, well, like, you can, like, surely negotiate with them. First of all, I'm going, like, okay, layout of the speech. First, I'm going to tell you why, like, persuasion is no longer possible, and then I'm going on to, like, why, like, this is justified killing in self-defense, and actually, the pro gamers are, like, actually infringing on the anti-gamers' right to life, and this is, like, now justified murder. I think this is, like, a principle, like, I think this is a gap missing in our opening. First of all, why is persuasion no longer possible? No panel, that this is, like, again, this is the 4th round of the game that we're entering, right? People have done trauma. People don't want to like go back on the promises they've made. And I think incentively, you need to look at like what the pro gamers' incentive are. I think the OO is like massively uncharitable when they're talking to us about like the pro gamers' incentives. Note that like for the pro gamers, they like actively need to, like their goal is either to die trying or kill everyone else to win. Right? This is inherently self-centric, and this is inherently, again, these people are inherently distrustful. They are inherently going like self-persevering, and they're inherently going to put their own needs over others. And at this point in the game, they are not going to back down from this, right? These are irrational actors who are only carrying in their self-interest. They are a force that like we cannot reasonably like relegate to. Again, in the event that again, like, oh well, like delegation and diplomacy, blah 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 blah. I think that like more or less like the more time that you wait, in the event that you just like wait until the blackout for people to just have complete chaos and you don't have an organized plan. Again, note in like opposite like comparative of like, oh well, why don't you just delegate this? I don't think that like pro gamers or anti-gamers are reasonably going to have like a mode for defense. Anyway, not going on to our constructive. First of all, I think that like, okay, why is the lights out then going to guarantee like some sort of success? First of all, again, I think this is what our opening mentioned, that like the anti-gamers like have the unique incentive. They are the only party in this like group that like actually knows that this is happening, right? Again, like this is like an unbalanced playing field, and that like, hey, this is also again like this is just an influence in the voting dynamics. Oh, always framing this as this is going to be a complete massacre and people are like, you're going to kill like everyone. This is like so like unharmful. Note that again, this is a 50-50 split. We are not saying that, oh, we're just going to kill all of the pro gamers. Actually, again, because of the like anti-gamers incentive of like, hey, we probably don't want people to die. Note that they are probably going to kill as few people as possible. There's only 2 to 3 people, or at least enough to tip the vote. This is an incredibly small margin, and this is like incredibly. This is not resulting in mass murder. This is only like a small like degree of actual harm that we do. Again, weighing this, just implicit weighing panel. It's either 455 people die, or maybe 2 more, and then we end the game. I don't understand what like Op is like arguing here. And also, again, like just like fight or flight like mechanisms of blackout induced chaos is going to like trigger like psychological responses. Like the fight response, like again, the pro gamers are probably going to somewhat attack anyway, like in this resistance. The pro gamers are probably going to kill people in their resistance because again, like they are self-interested, whatever. Anyways, why, okay, getting onto the principle of self-defense and why intrinsically are the like pro gamers infringing on the anti-gamers right to life, and like why we should prioritize the anti-gamers more. First of all, again, when we can secure a majority vote, there's going to be no more like deaths, and that like in Squid Game, the only way to present mass death is from stopping the games, and the vote is the only way in which we can actually like achieve this. The vote is now deadlocked, and like the pro gamers are probably going to be like striking first, and the anti-gamers are justified in like a surprise attack into secure a vote to end violence. Pro gamers are existential threats. They want to finish the game, which inherently requires the death of everyone else in the game. This is not passive. This is not neutral. They are actively choosing to move forward in the system designed for mass murder. Self-defense includes preemptive action. Note this panel. The real law of moral philosophy, a credible fear of lethal harm, justifies preemptive action. I want you dead so I can win a legitimate attack, the legitimate justification for the anti-gamers to be able to act. No, the anti-gamers just don't want to die, and they also want to protect the lives of the pro gamers. Right? This is not exclusive. Like again, like we can protect the pro gamers on our side too. Again, no panel that like for like these like people to enter this game. Again, like this is a coerced choice. This is not actual. Like a lot of these people who are like downtrodden, they are like systemically burdened by society. No, thank you. I'll take one at like 5 whatever. Okay, like these people are systemically like challenged by society, right? They've probably been like in upbringings that like they probably haven't actually had a systemic chance, right? Like they entered these games coercively. Again, like they were picked up by a van, like drugged and like put off to whatever, right? Like this is like an inherent challenge. These people don't actually have like a like morally like an incentive choice. And now that in 4 games in, we uniquely have this like new option and a new awakening, and people have seen the murder. And then, okay, even if people want to continue the games, why is this still bad? Again, I think this is more or less just dignity and self-preservation, right? There is no peaceful resolution to this. The vote is now tied. These people will never change their minds, and the longer that you wait, the more people will inevitably die. Just self-defense is justifiable, whereas people are going to like attack first regardless. Like we might as well set up like a coerced attack from the pro gamer side. Again, the Squid Games inherently violate percent. They did not choose this. Choice is not free. Coerced survival just to escape ruin. Like again, people have revealed preferences to life. People generally want to live. They have life over money because again, as much as like money can buy you happiness, to where like again, when you only have when you can only like win, only one person can win. Again, inherently, every single pro gamer wants every single person else in the competition to die, regardless if they win or not. Again, they don't care about their own lives, but that doesn't mean that other people should be able to not care about their own. Right? Squid Game is inherently zero sum. Like again, like a vote like for continuing the game is to say I'm okay with the deaths of others, including you, for my potential benefit. Voting to stop the anti-gamers is the only way to out. And that like we should care more. But why should we care about more about the anti-gamers? They want the the game to end. They want to protect lives, even their opponents. Again, for the pro gamers to continue living, they will end up killing both the anti-gamers and pro gamers, right? No, this okay, and then again, noting the fact that like this is protected time, noting the fact that like, again, this attack will manifest in the least amount of kills as possible. This is a tied, but this is a 50-50. You have to kill like at least one person to be able to actually make this vote happen. Note that the pro gamers, like as I've characterized, are probably extremely stingy in their vote. They are self-interested. They're not going to be convinced anyways. Don't listen to opposition when they tell you that this is going to be resolved peacefully. It's not going to. No, panel, that the pro gamer rule happens by default. If no one acts, the game continues. With it, hundreds die. This is not neutral ground. Being passive here means complicity in death, right? So that means that even if our attack is not successful, off-world just happens anyway. But we might as well try. Again, the people, like the anti-gamers, have a right to life. They have a right to protect that life, and they have a right to be self-justified in their actions, even if they are violent, even if they are being complicit in the game's like violence. I think that's still like, I think the justification to be able to get out of this game for the chance of freedom outweighs the potential of like, oh well, you're killing other people. I think that you more or less should be able, you should be preferring the anti-gamers if they want to be free. Again, the like pro gamer world happens anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that speech calling on MO. Here.
Hello, just to check, am I audible this time? I really hope I don't get disconnected again.
Can you try just saying something just to be sure? Thank you.
This house believes that anti-gamers should launch an attack on pro gamers.
All
Hello?
good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Verbal POIs, wait for me to acknowledge you, he, him, just setting up my timer. Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Very quickly, what I want to do in this speech is to really just clean up this debate. Because the trade-off that we've witnessed from opening half this far wasn't even a trade-off at all. It was one big game of he said, she said, where no one is willing to make concessions and engage with their own worst case and the best case of their opponent. The first thing that I want to clarify on account of framing is on who anti-gamers and pro-gamers are. Yes, I agree. These are people who either want the game to continue or want the game to not continue because they value different things. But notice that a very important framing that both or all benches thus far missed is that some of these people are moderates. That is the only reason they don't want to end the games because they're desperate outside of the games, or the only reason why they may still want to win the games but they choose to just opt out of it because they're too scared to die. To say that I don't get this push coming from government bench when they tell you that it's principally justified to kill these people, when in reality they were forced there not out of their own volition, they were essentially coerced and manipulated to play the games out of necessity, out of a fundamental misalignment with what society at large wants them to do. The second important reframing that I want to do is on why the games are even there. That is, the VIP and the frontmen use these for entertainment. And Gi-hun, Seong Gi-hun, is a part of the info slide, is well aware of this. And another thing on account of framing that all benches thus far missed is the fact that Seong Gi-hun is there. We say that one, he fundamentally wants to end the games. That's why he went back, even if he already won last season. Then he's well aware of the cruelty that the people are beholden to and the lack of respect that these VIPs have for them. And while we did hear something from opening government earlier when they tell you that Seong Gi-hun is a good leader, thus making the attack more feasible. Yes, he is a good leader, but that's exactly why it won't happen. He does not want to mindlessly kill people. He's the most important actor to consider here because he's the only one who can lead the anti-gamers. If it's not him, the movement fails because he's the only one with the information and the charisma to actually lead people. He started with just a few number of anti-gamers, but as the show went on in season 2, progressively, he had more and more numbers enough to actually fight the system. On account of that, some quick responses. First is on the claim that these people are going to be largely unaware and the attack will be successful. No, people are paranoid. They won't sleep with all their eyes closed. They're fundamentally scared of dying. Second response, they say that people won't blame anti-gamers but instead the system. It assumes that this attack is perfect, but what happens when you get injured when the moment your attack fails? When you try to choke someone out while they're asleep and they decided to fight back and they overpower you, what happens? But even, and this is engaging with them to the full extent, even if it does work, what happens? At what cost are you willing to kill people when your entire principle to be an anti-gamer in the first place was to leave the games and to not like spill any more needless blood. The last thing then is a response under principle and attempt to principally justify killing the pro gamers. Number one, yes, you can maybe justify that to some extent, but not to you, and especially not to Seong Gi-hun, whose entire purpose in joining the games again is to end it, to end this mindless bloodshed, to end this this classic form of entertainment by the rich and by the elite. Yes, maybe you will live, but you don't really change anything. You don't meet the threshold that Given probably wants, and you're probably going to be living with regret and trauma. Here's the extension then coming from side closing opposition. We say that first and foremost, irrespective of the pragmatic implications of this, it's principally justified for you to not want to kill these people in the first place. And on top of that, where you actually end up fracturing your own movement and at the same time falling into the demands of the VIPs, proving that your views in its entirety were hypocritical at best. The first extension on how you fracture your movement. We agree with the claim coming from side opening opposition that yes, it's principally justified. But this is independent of any form of combat dynamics that they mentioned of earlier. They can take that with them. It's not needed in this debate. The very important thing to note here is that your views as anti-gamers is literally to end this mindless bloodshed. The same thing can be said of some people and the one leading your movement. You're only best able to co-opt this benefit of principled fulfillment the moment you decide not to kill. You can rebel against the system, you can shoot guns, or you can try to kill the guards like Seong Gi-hun did in season 2, but you can never expect him to kill his own fellow players because he knows how much they're suffering. Moreover, it's against your group's principles. Likely, most of the people in your group won't want to spill needless blood, and you all, to some extent, value each other people's lives. Notice how this is independent of any outcomes, because this one is likelier to be chosen because typically killing people is a big threshold that must be crossed. And two is that the reason why Given wanted to join the games in the first place actively defeats the purpose of that the moment you decide to kill these people. But the second then is the moment you kill people, you actually confine yourselves to the game. You lose your chance of escape. Remember the moderates I talked about earlier? Well, now that you've lessened the number of players in competition, what's stopping them from deciding that they want to continue the game because now there's less competition for them? In terms of the foundation of the movement being cooperation, you actively tear that down the moment you side with government bench. But the second is that we agree that killing is harmful to some extent, but it's not because of any form of combat dynamics. It's the individual psyche telling you that it's incorrect for you to kill, and that's why it's impossible. We say that all of the principled reasons that we've given outweigh literally every bench thus far. But the second and most important argument then is on why you fall into the demands of the VIPs, and if you are an anti-gamer, you do not want that. Two levels. The first is to say that Gi-hun is literally the leader of your movement. Absent him, you're not able to get anything done. You're likely going to die. You're likely going to get shot by the guards, if not killed by pro gamers who want you gone. We say that the impact of this that now
POI?
you're not going to be able to rally for support the moment you try to attack independently. Before that, okay, go POI.
Okay, and so far, okay, if you don't attack and the system continues, and if you do attack and fail, the system continues, what matters is the justification of attack. CG is able to prove that this justification is like granted.
No, we say that one, if you're given you want to end the games, and two, even if you do succeed in killing these people, what happens? It shows that your conviction is half-assed. It motivates the game masters and the VIPs to continue the games. Why? Because it shows that at the end of the day, no matter how principled your stance is, you're still going to resort to killing, to the ugliest part of human nature as a means of getting what you want. The whole point of Squid Game, the whole point of Given returning in season 2 despite already winning is to challenge that. And even on the individual level, because let's engage with CG, right? Even if you do succeed, even if the attack is successful, one, it does not guarantee that you are able to escape the game the moment that people decide that now there's less competition, I want to keep playing. And two, it's going to be likely, even if you do escape, it's likely going to give you a life filled with regret. Whereas if you die fighting the way Given did in season 2, wherein the counterfactual that we're pushing for is probably what he did in the show, wherein he fought the system and not the players, you're only able to get solace and catharsis then. We say then that in terms of the benefits and mechanizations that we posit, we are the only ones who demonstrated understanding of this debate, and it's why we should win. Side with CO.
Thank you for that speech calling on GovWeb. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, all good.
Wonderful. Okay. Okay. The time will start in 3, 2, 1. I want to quote Cappuccino Assassino. Opening is caught in a deadlock of feasibility. How do we beat this deadlock? In 2 ways. First, self-defense is justified when the outcome of your action is a world preferable to you and what is the only course of action left to you. So then why is this outcome preferable? Because the anti-gamers are likely to live. We're likely to go home, to end the games, to end the killing, to leave with comparatively less trauma. And as anti-gamers, this is what we care about most. And therefore, any actions that take them out of this nightmare, where the anti-gamers can wake up without seeing those cold, dead white walls, without wearing their bloodstained uniforms, any actions that can manifest this world are the most desirable. Why is this then the only course of action? Because we are going to die. And this is what Emma tells you. Because insofar as the pro gamers are trying to win the Squid Games, first, they want us to die. That is, their will is one that is meant to subject the anti-gamers. They want to instrumentalize you, to use your bodies as a vessel to achieve victory. This means then that they don't respect your dignity. They see in the continuation of your lives as the only reason why there isn't more money in the prize pool. Insofar as they want to win the game, they actively want to kill you to add more money to the prize pool, to add to a bigger reward. The second reason is that they actually will kill you. Note that the goal of the pro gamers is to succeed in the game. This means then that in order for the games to end, for them to win, means that they have to actively take actions to endanger and to kill you. And given that this group is more vulnerable, that is, they're not willing as much to participate in the games, the pro gamers are going to take advantage of this. They're going to instrumentalize them further. But the third reason is that they will kill you, and they will do it so very soon. This is just obvious. It is going to happen because the pro gamers have the incentive, because this maximizes their chances at winning the game. They also have the capacity, because the people who are willing to play this game, that is, these pro gamers, are people who are already quite aggressive, people who don't value human life that much, or at least prioritize money over life. The very fact that they're capable of boiling life down to a material substance, this means that this is why we ought not to care about the pro gamers. We ought to care about them comparatively less. And this is what Emma tells you, because insofar as they are willing to violate the bodies and agencies of the anti-gamers to reduce them down to an amount of money, they've then committed a deep moral harm and have foregone a certain amount of moral consideration and prioritization. But even if you don't buy this, it doesn't matter, because self-defense is good, because the resistance of evil is a good in and of itself. And I'll give an example, right? There are certain villages in Mexico that get captured by cartels in order to use as trade centers to extract ransom, to kill the women and children inside there. These cartels are too massive for the village to ever take down. There is no chance of success, but it doesn't change the fact that for the villagers to fight back, to take arms, to kill the cartel members, this is something that is justified because they are fighting off against a force of evil. The implication is clear. The anti-gamers must launch this attack because it is necessitated by the principle of self-defense. It is the only thing they can do. And this takes out OO, because they hinge their entire case on the anti-gamers being pro-life. But the reason they are pro-life is because they prioritize their agency, their well-being first and foremost. And at the point where the pro-gamers are ready to wage war on them, their principle simply doesn't stand, right? We don't consider it a severe moral harm when the captured Mexican village tries to fight back against brutal cartels that try to crush and exploit them, because it is an a priori good to allow people to assert their personhood, to defend themselves when it is just. Why does this beat OG's principle? Because they talk a lot about protecting vulnerable groups, and this is the good thing. But the problem with this is that they needed to prove why the anti-gamers are so uniquely vulnerable compared to the pro-gamers. They don't do this properly. We actually prove to you why the pro-gamers ought to be deprioritized morally, because they themselves have chosen to devalue human life and devalue human dignity. Our principle is also just simply more tied, because the reason why vulnerable groups should be protected can be general. Maybe that is perhaps OG's proven why the anti-gamers deserve to be protected by some other actor, how they've earned this protection. But the reason why they are justified in launching the attack themselves is because it is self-defense. No, you also cannot be a moderate, right? You're voting. Any active vote in this game is yes or no. It is an active decision to prioritize human life or devalue human life. This means that the moderates do not exist. But then the second way we beat this deadlock is through this crucial round winning mechanism that Emma gives you. Because note that all sides in this debate can see that the sides are evenly matched. Both sides have the same numbers, which is why the vote doesn't go through. This means that in order for the anti-gamers to win, we only need to kill one person for the vote to be unbalanced. Because so long as our numbers are greater, insofar as we have one more person they do, then the anti-gamers can win the vote. What does this mean then? This means we can win through strategy. The vast majority of the anti-gamers can hide, while only a few go out and target one person in order to win. But also, the attack doesn't even need to succeed, because the threat of attack, and this is what Emma tells you, the threat of attack can force people to our side. Note that this is a vote that needs to be won on incredibly small margins. That small margin is all we need to access in order to win. And this is where OG's surprise mechanism gets best access on CG, because the fact that the attack is a surprise means that the pro gamers have not yet mounted an organized assault. They have not yet formed a strong collective consciousness. And so we're able to best convert people on our side is through this threat of violence that is now. Opposition's comparative is just simply not enough because trying to lead them and convince them is the status quo. But the problem is this: they don't prove the comparative at all. Opposition cannot win because presumably you've already tried to convert people on our side already during votes before the start of the game. These anti-gamers have already seen mothers beg and plead to stop the violence against their children who just want to return to their homes, who just want the games to end. The reason they haven't converted is because these anti-gamers prioritize themselves and their self-interest above anyone else. This necessitates that the only way to reach these people, to convince them, is these sort of threats. When they see our side coming at them with acts of organized violence, when they see that our group is powerful, is prepared to use violence now, this changes their mindset on us from being just a pacifist group pleading to leave the game to a serious threat that needs to be taken seriously. This is why groups like the Black Panthers turned to aggressive methods of protest, because it is the best way to convince an opposition group. This is how the Black Panthers were able to secure civil rights in America. So this means we flip their argument completely, because if persuasion is to be possible, it is best accessed through CG, right? And here's the weighing on this. First, we weigh on likelihood, right? Because we're able to best convert people in this manner. So taking all of their points at their best, we're able to access them in a better way through the mechanism I've given you. But second is through morality, because we prioritize the most moral actors. We allow the pro gamers to defend themselves, which is an a priori good. Note that in our government side's worst case, death happens either way. Either we die in the attack or we die in the games. But the margin that CG is able to win on is that as long as one person dies or one person is convinced, we are able to win the vote, we're able to leave the games, as well as the strength of the principle that we give you, right? The strength of the principle is incredibly powerful. Self-defense is justified for these people because there is no other course of action, because they feel as though they are going to die. They're very likely going to die in this game. And this takes out pretty much everything opposition says, because their points are all, oh, we are pro-life, we don't want to kill these people. We're telling you, yes, we do, because it's the only way that they can actually survive, the only way they can exercise their autonomy, the only way they can free themselves from the change of this game. Insofar as we are the only side that proves you were able to best access this, and I give you an extension on openings material by proving why the surprise mechanism actually works best for our case. We're able to beat OG, we're able to beat all of opposition. It's for these reasons I'm so proud to say this is a CG win.
Thank you for that speech calling on Opwip. Here.
Hello. I'm assuming I'm audible, so please just give me a moment to get my timer. Also, POIs via chat, please, I really would appreciate if you don't verbalize. I promise I'll take around fifth minute. Okay. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Gi-hun started the game hopeless, with only a few anti-gamers on his side. But at the fourth round, he was able to equalize the number. What this proves is that over time, even in a short span of 4 rounds, people from pro gamers can switch sides to anti-gamers once they're exposed to the visceral images of these games. This proves that negotiation is going to be inherently possible with moderates, and this is how we will defend the extension. The first thing I'm going to do is to ground this extension and prove why it is logically prior to OO. Because OO is running the argument that anti-gamers violate principle, but they don't necessarily link this to the middle analysis. Why is violating this principle bad? We prove to you on 3 metrics. The first is just that you fracture your own movement, which means when you initiate your violence, you defracture your own anti-gamer coalition, because they are united not by the survival or by any allegiance, but by their shared moral rejection of the game's violence. Which means that the moment that their faction chooses premeditated murder, they're probably going to lose their own belief systems insofar as you also expose them to the same things that you promised to be against. Which means you lose the trust in the moral legitimacy of the moderates who only align with the anti-gamers because you represent hope and decency at the end of the day. Even if they don't switch to the pro-gamers, they either withdraw just because of your own involvement, and they vote to continue out of fear or become paralyzed, which means you undermine your own movement's coherence. The second thing is that you harm the moderates in the voting mechanism. And this is important because when the vote is decided because both sides are already equal, even if you kill some pro gamers, the cost is that you delegitimize your own vote. So first, you already lose some of the support of your own anti-gamer movement, but secondly, the remaining pro gamers are obviously going to be so angry because the people that are most proximate to them are killed, which means that because of this, you're probably going to lose out of the voting mechanism. POIs via chat, please. Which means that this is going to be harmful for two reasons. Number one is we prove to you how this is going to harm your own best sustainable mechanism of a voting mechanism to end the games. But secondly, this is logically prerequisite because even if opening opposition dropped this as a buzzword as of the voting mechanism, if you check your notes, they don't necessarily prove the missing middle link analysis and the incentives. Why will the pro gamers switch to you nevertheless? And this is how we answer this. There are three main reasons. The first is that they're exposed to more visceral images because the rounds get more and more like nastier over time, especially in the first four rounds. You're already those who switch to your side, which is how you equalize the numbers. Probably there are going to be one or two people who are going to switch to you after the fifth round. This is the main timeline problem that we proved to you. But the second thing is that if you kill people that are proximate to them, and this engages with CG when they tell you that killing one person is probably enough as a tipping point, you're probably going to alienate some members of your own voting base, but also the entirety of the pro gamers who are now going to be angry that it was you that they blamed in the first place. And the last thing we prove to you is that you dehumanize your own anti-gamer players, which means that you make them subservient to what really is the goal and the power and the ideology of what the VIPs do. How does this reposition us against OO? We prove to you that CO is logically prior because of three reasons. One, we prove why the principle matters because OO claims it's bad to become the system, but they never explain why. CO gives you the missing link, the internal fracturization, the loss of moderate support, and the undermining of your moral legitimacy. And second, we are more charitable to Gov premises because OO just gives structural reasons as to why this attack will not be successful. Even if it has to be in our worst case and we accept and concede that this is successful, we still give to you the main mechanism as to how this engages with the best version of Gov at the end of the day. Let's go to CG then and engage with CG very, very quickly. What does CG tell us? CG says three main things. Number one, persuasion is no longer viable. And we think this is a false premise because this is the first moment in time where both sides are equal in number. This is a crucial psychological inflection point because now every vote matters. And if you can see over time that the trend grew from like a very, very few to equal, just in the terms of the timeline of the anti-gamers growing in popularity because people are more exposed to these visceral images, we can prove that maybe if you can just convince one more person. But you lose that bargaining chip insofar as you kill the people that are proximate to them. And if you kill the people, you just alienate your own voter base. Second, they tell you that killing a few breaks the coalition because you can tip the vote. But this is where we prove to you the importance of the extension that makes us prior to OO because you can't surgically kill without consequences. The moment even just a few pro gamers die, A, moderates are probably fear that they're going to be next, which means that they already lose the moral legitimacy of what your own anti-gamer base is going to have. And B, your own anti-gamer allies now question whether they're being led and manipulated into a violent war. Regardless, you lose both wings from both sides of the house. And third, they tell you a very, very like weird push about how it's morally justified because pro gamers are complicit in harm in the first place. But we think that this moral claim is very bad for two reasons. First, a lot of these pro gamers are probably driven out of desperation, which is the key characterization and reframing you heard from Member earlier about how some of these people still just want to continue the games because they're like forced into these behaviors because of the financial incentives and the lack of money at the end of the day. But secondly, many of them are desperate and they're not malicious. CG just throws away the fact that some subset of this population could still be won over. That makes them worse than OG, who at least just cares about ending the game. Before that, POI from OG. 3, 2, 1. CG. 3, 2, 1.
All right. Okay. Like you're saying that people are going to like flip their vote. Anti-gamer people aren't going to flip their vote after the attack. They're like because if they flip, they're going to continue the game. Also, your analysis on like like structural reasons like people are going to like is disincentivized. People like want to like preserve themselves. Like the anti-gamers are preserving the like pro gamers' lives. Like they are saving more people.
I get your point. But for time constraints, please. A majority of the anti-gamers are part of those games not just out of survival, but also because of their shared belief that they don't want more bloodshed. Meaning, if it is 50-50 in number, and even if it's just one person who believes that less bloodshed should matter and that one person can flip his vote, by your own metrics of tipping points, it is on your side where these people lose their own legitimacy in the first place. But secondly, we also prove to you that negotiation is going to be far more harder because it's now on your side that when the proximate people are killed on pro gamers, they are less likely to just bite into your own negotiations and compromises at the end of the day. Let's lastly engage then with OG. They tell you that there are two things that they try to tell you. It's principled to kill to stop the game, and the organizers will be blamed for the deaths. The first thing is just that this principle contradicts their strategy because you can't just say that it's justified to kill to end violence if the very act of killing makes it more likely that the game continues. Because it's when the VIPs are much able to justify that even a man like Gi-hun, for example, is going to surrender to their own psychological battles, which means that Through this, they win the battle, but ultimately still lose the war. Squid Games will still nevertheless continue insofar as these people are going to rationalize violence. But the second thing is just that the organizers will not be blamed for the deaths because narrative control flips against you when the only people who die are pro gamers and anti gamers live. It becomes obvious that this was a coordinated hit in the first place. Which means then, on why CO wins this, one, we provide the much more logically prerequisite counterfactual than OO. Next, we engage in the worst case of our own against the best case of government by proving to you the voting mechanisms and how you appeal to moderates. For all of those reasons, oppose.
And that concludes the round. Thank you. You may now virtually cross the house. We'll be back with the OA. I'd like to invite my panelists to go hop over to the tug of war deliberation room. Thank you.